So, hello everyone and welcome back to STUDIFYSUCCESS. We are back with another chapter of class 10th biology, which is life processes, and this is the first part of the chapter. So, let's get started with the chapter, and all these notes are available in the description section. And for more study content, you can always visit our website studifysuccess.com. So, let's get started with this very interesting chapter. So, let's start with the name of the chapter itself. Life processes. What does life processes mean? Let's break the words and let's understand what are life processes. Life processes symbolize the processes which are essential for life. That is why they are called life processes, because they are very essential, very important for our survival, for our sustenance. That is, they are very important for our life. So, life processes are the basic processes. So, these are not, for example, reproduction is not a life process, but it is important for the continuation of the species. But nutrition, respiration, without oxygen we cannot survive. So, respiration, nutrition, transportation and excretion, these are the four processes which are very essential for the sustenance of our life and hence are called life processes. Let's move ahead. We know we have two type of organisms based on the number of cells. So we have unicellular organisms and we have multicellular organisms. Unicellular organisms have only one cell within their body, so they are only one celled organism. So considering this is an organism, so they do not have any specific organs for all these life processes. For nutrition, they take in food from one side and they release food from the other side. For respiration as well, they take in food, they take in oxygen and release the byproducts from the opposite side. Then transportation, excretion, everything is done within this single cell only, without the presence of any special organs. Without any special organs, all these things are done. How are they done? Because the complete cell is in contact with the surroundings. So, with the help of basic diffusion, all the transportation from outside to inside can occur. For example, you can see here, if this is the membrane of a cell, okay, and what is diffusion? We are understanding what is diffusion. Considering this is the membrane of a cell, and inside the cell we have, so this is a condition after respiration or after respiration. So inside the cell, CO2 content is very high. CO2 content is very high. You can see all these are CO2 molecules and the CO2 concentration is very high. Outside the cell, the CO2 concentration is very low. What is diffusion? Diffusion is the movement of any substance or any molecule from high concentration to low concentration across a membrane. So you can see here we have a membrane. From high concentration, CO2 will move across the membrane towards the low concentration area. This is what diffusion is. Because the complete unicellular organism is in contact with the external environment, they can easily undergo diffusion. So all the material from the external environment can move inside the cell, and from inside the cell a lot of material can move outside the cell as well. So this is what happens in case of unicellular organisms. For multicellular organisms, what happens? For multicellular organisms, they have specialized organs for different life processes. For example, in humans, for respiration we have lungs, nostrils, we have the nasal passage. For nutrition we have a complete alimentary canal. For all the processes we have different organ systems, we have different tissue systems, we have various different types of tissues, different types of cells, we have a complex structure. So this is what happens in multicellular organisms, because they are not in direct contact. For example, if in a human only the outer skin is in contact with the external environment, but the inner organs, that is our stomach, is not in contact with the outer environment. So I cannot directly take in food from my skin to the stomach, because it is not in direct contact with the external environment. This is why they have specialized organs for it, which can transport the food from outside to inside to the stomach, and diffusion is not possible in multicellular organisms. So this is what are life processes, the processes which are essential for the survival of an organism. We are going to study about all the 4 basic life processes in detail now. So we are starting with nutrition. What is nutrition? Why is it important? We are going to see that first. So we know that every organism, you can see a giraffe here, even the plants, animals, all the living organisms need energy for their survival. They need energy, and without energy they cannot synthesize food, they cannot continue their regular daily life functions, they cannot do anything without energy. So for energy we need food. From where do we get this energy? We get this energy from food. Plants also get energy from food. So this food is very important, and food can be simple or complex carbon compounds. Okay, so there are different types of food molecules also that we consume. Then what is nutrition? Nutrition is the process of taking in this food by an organism and its utilization by the body for the growth, to repair the damaged parts, and for energy. So what is nutrition? Nutrition is the process by which any organism, for example this giraffe is consuming leaves. By consuming leaves, it is intake of food is happening. So any organism takes in food, which is mentioned here. Any organism takes in food, and then what happens to the food? The food is utilized, the food is digested, and then from it the nutrients are absorbed. Why are the nutrients absorbed? For various functions. Firstly, very importantly, for energy. The nutrients, the food provides us energy for body growth, to build the body and to repair the damaged parts. We need this food and the nutrients, and we get this by the intake of food and the utilization of it by the body. This is what nutrition is. So nutrition is the intake of food and its utilization by the body. How does the body utilize it? For growth, for repair of damaged parts, and for energy. Then we have 2 modes of nutrition. Modes of nutrition means 2 methods of nutrition, or 2 ways of nutrition by which any organism consumes, any organism takes their food inside their body. So we have autotrophic nutrition and we have heterotrophic nutrition. These are the 2 broad modes of nutrition. Starting with autotrophic nutrition. Again, let's break the word. Auto means self. Auto means self. So this is the mode of nutrition in which organisms prepare their own food. They are not dependent on anyone else. They make their own food using some raw materials. For example, the plants present here. All the green plants prepare their own food by the process of photosynthesis. You can see they are taking some raw materials like carbon dioxide, water from the soil, and energy. They are taking all these materials, the nutrients from the soil as well, they are taking that. So using all these raw materials, they prepare their own food. We are heterotrophs. What are heterotrophs? Heterotrophs is mode of nutrition in which organisms cannot prepare their own food and are dependent on others for their food. So we are heterotrophs, we are dependent on plants. You can say that okay, we also cook and we prepare our own food, but cooking is different than preparing that own food. What we cook, for example potatoes, what we cook is derived from the plants only. We cannot make potatoes in our labs or just like that. So we are heterotrophs because we cannot prepare our own food. We are directly or indirectly dependent on plants for our food. You can see the giraffe here is consuming the leaves of the plant. The giraffe is directly dependent on the plants for its nutrition. So the heterotrophic organisms are dependent, whereas the autotrophic organisms are independent organisms. Now heterotrophic nutrition can further be divided into three subparts, which is holozoic nutrition, parasitic nutrition and saprotrophic nutrition. What are all these? We will study in detail further ahead. But to give you a brief, holozoic nutrition is when any organisms intakes the complete food inside their body and then they digest it. For example, human beings. Human beings take their complete food inside the body, then they consume it. Parasitic organisms, they do not take their food inside them. They are just on their prey and they derive the prey of its nutrients. They do not harm the prey. Saprotrophic are completely different. They derive their food from dead and decaying organisms. They derive nutrients from the decaying organisms. We will see all this in much more detail. We will move ahead with autotrophic nutrition and how does it occurs in plant. So, for autotrophic nutrition, carbon and energy requirements of the autotrophic organism are fulfilled by photosynthesis. What is photosynthesis? Photosynthesis is a process, very important definition. You are learning it since very younger classes and it is very important. Photosynthesis is the process by which the green plants, only the green plants, prepare their own food because they are autotrophs with the help of water and carbon dioxide. These are the main raw materials in presence of chlorophyll and sunlight. This definition completely has four different parts which are very important. Firstly, it is a process which occurs in green plants only. Secondly, they prepare their own food. What is their food? Carbohydrates is their end product or is the food which is prepared. How do they prepare their own food? Using some raw materials which is water and carbon dioxide in the presence of chlorophyll and sunlight. Without sunlight, without chlorophyll, photosynthesis cannot occur. So, all these four aspects are very important for photosynthesis. It is a process in green plants by which they prepare their own food with the help of water and carbon dioxide in the presence of chlorophyll and sunlight. So, the raw materials are water and carbon dioxide. Apart from this, we also have nutrients, but these are the major raw materials. Then the product which we get is carbohydrate, which is stored as starch in the plant body, and oxygen, which is liberated in this reaction. You can see the reaction over here. Very important equation, you must learn this equation. So, carbon dioxide, which is CO2, with water in the presence of chlorophyll and sunlight. When we write some things above and below the arrow, it indicates that these are needed or the reaction is occurring in the presence of these things. So, carbon dioxide and water combining together in the presence of chlorophyll and sunlight give us a carbohydrate, which is glucose. This glucose is stored as starch along with oxygen, which is liberated in this reaction, or oxygen which is released in this reaction, and some amount of water. You can see the sun gives us sunlight and the initial energy. Water we get from the roots and from stomata as well. Then carbon dioxide we get from stomata, and stomata releases oxygen after the reaction, and at last the glucose is formed. Glucose is a carbohydrate. Now, how is photosynthesis occurring? What is actually happening in photosynthesis? There are three main steps which need to be kept in mind. So, these three steps are: first step is the absorption of light energy by chlorophyll. What is chlorophyll? Firstly, chlorophyll is the green pigment which is present in plants. You can see this plant is green in color. The compound or the substance or the molecule that makes it green in color is chlorophyll. Okay, so the chlorophyll is the pigment or the molecule which is found in green plants, which gives us the characteristic green color. So, this green color is due to chlorophyll. So, firstly, this chlorophyll absorbs the light energy by the sun. So, sun is dissipating energy as the light energy. So, it absorbs sunlight. Then this light is converted into chemical energy, because plant cannot work on the light energy, so it converts it into chemical energy. Then this chemical energy is used for splitting up of water. This chemical energy is used to split water, to break water. We have water molecule here. The water molecule is broken down into H2 and oxygen. It is broken down into hydrogen and oxygen. Then the reduction of carbon dioxide by hydrogen to form carbohydrates. Then we also have carbon dioxide. This liberated hydrogen acts on this carbon dioxide to convert it into carbohydrate. In this way, carbohydrates are formed. Let me repeat. Firstly, the light energy is absorbed by chlorophyll. Then this light energy is converted to chemical energy. Due to this chemical energy, water molecule splits into or breaks into hydrogen and oxygen. This liberated hydrogen acts on carbon dioxide to convert it into carbohydrates. Reduction of carbohydrates take place. So this is what is happening in the process of photosynthesis. So for example, some plants in desert, we have huge amount of light energy is available to the plants in day. So what happens, the plants undergo this first step a lot in day, and at night they only undergo the second and the third step, because they store a lot of light which is converted into chemical energy, and then using that light they continuously do photosynthesis at night as well. At day they only absorb the light energy because there is abundance of light energy by sun. So this is how the photosynthesis process actually works. Then we have some components that I told you, for example chlorophyll. How do we know that these components are so essential for us? How do we prove that? So these activities are mentioned in your book, and these activities can come in your exam as well. So these are important and easy activities. So what is chlorophyll? As I told you, it is a green pigment present in the leaves of a plant. They are stored in chloroplast. So we know in a cell we have different organelles. In a eukaryotic cell, for example this is a eukaryotic cell, we have different organelles present in a cell. So in the chloroplast, which is again one organelle, in a chloroplast we have a green pigment present which is called the chlorophyll. Now how do we know that chlorophyll is so important for photosynthesis, and photosynthesis will not occur without chlorophyll? For this we take a variegated leaf. What is a variegated leaf? A variegated leaf has chlorophyll in some parts only. It has different colors and it has chlorophyll in some parts of it only. Other parts do not have chlorophyll. That is a variegated leaf. So we have taken a plant with variegated leaves and then we have kept it in a dark room. Why have we kept it in a dark room? Because in light this plant must be going through photosynthesis and it must have some stored starch produced in it as well. So we keep it in dark so that it does not undergo photosynthesis now, and it uses up all the stored starch and it finishes up the starch as well. Now there is no starch present in the plant after 3 days of keeping it in the dark. All the starch is used up. Then we keep the plant in sunlight for 6 hours. Then we take a leaf from the plant and we mark the green areas on the leaf. So we have marked the green areas on the leaf, and then we start the process to remove this chlorophyll. Okay, to remove this chlorophyll we boil the variegated leaf in boiling water. Then in ethanol or alcohol we boil the leaf. After boiling the leaf we see that chlorophyll, the leaf has been decolorized or the chlorophyll has been removed from the leaf. Now the leaf is completely white like this. Now we add the iodine solution. We know that if starch is present, iodine solution turns, in presence of starch, turns into a blue-black solution. This we know. So we use iodine solution to see if there is any starch present in the leaf or not. Then we see that of course photosynthesis has occurred, but only on those parts where green pigment was present. On the rest of the parts there has been no photosynthesis and no starch. That is why iodine has not shown any blue black color on the rest of the part. Only the green parts of the leaf turns blue black, and hence shows that only in these regions chlorophyll has occurred, and hence chlorophyll is very necessary for photosynthesis. In the region where chlorophyll is not present, photosynthesis cannot occur without chlorophyll. So this activity shows us the importance of chlorophyll in photosynthesis. Without chlorophyll, photosynthesis cannot occur. Moving ahead to the next component, which is carbon dioxide. But before carbon dioxide, let's study about stomata. How does the intake of carbon dioxide happen? So if there is a leaf present, considering these leaves are present, at the lower surface of the leaf there are small tiny structures present, as you can see here. These structures are called the stomata. These small structures are called the stomata. These tiny pores open and close when required, and by this water or carbon dioxide or oxygen can move across the leaf. So these are the tiny pores called stomata. Now how do they open and how do they close? This action of their opening and closing is controlled by the guard cells, which are at the side of this stomata are two cells which are kidney bean shaped. These are called the guard cells. They control the opening and closing of the stomatal pore. So how do they open and how do they close? Whenever the guard cells absorb water, they swell and hence they widen up. That is why the stomatal pore is opened. In case of less water in the plant, the water moves out to the neighboring cells and the guard cells squeeze and contract in size. So the stomatal pore also contracts and it becomes very short. By absorbing of water, the stomatal pore opens and widens up. When the water is less, due to loss of water, the guard cells shrink and the pore closes. This is how the action of stomata is controlled by the guard cells. Stomata is not always open, neither always closed, so it is controlled by the action of guard cells around it. Now by this stomatal pore only, carbon dioxide from the outside environment, carbon dioxide comes into the leaf and it is used by the plant. Now how do we know that carbon dioxide is essential for photosynthesis, and without it plant cannot do photosynthesis? So we have taken two plants, again we have kept them in dark so that all the starch is used up. So we have kept it in a dark room for 3 days so that all the starch is used up. Then we have kept them separate and we have covered them with the bell jar. We have sealed them at the bottom, we have sealed them, and we have kept it in sunlight. Why have we kept it in sunlight? So that photosynthesis occurs. Now what do we see? In one bell jar we have kept potassium hydroxide. Why we have kept potassium hydroxide? Potassium hydroxide is a special compound and it absorbs all the carbon dioxide. So now no carbon dioxide can enter the bell jar because the bell jar is sealed. No carbon dioxide can enter the bell jar. Only the carbon dioxide present in the bell jar can act and can be used up by the plant to do photosynthesis. Of course there is no vacuum, there is air present, so carbon dioxide present in the bell jar only can be used up. But if we keep potassium hydroxide, there will be no carbon dioxide present even in the bell jar, and from outside as well carbon dioxide cannot enter the bell jar. So now what happens? After some hours we again check the leaf and test it for starch by using iodine solution. We see that in this plant we see a blue black coloration, but in the leaves of this plant there is no blue black coloration. Why? This means that this plant, which has potassium hydroxide, is not producing any starch, which means there is no photosynthesis being occurred over here, whereas in the other plant it is able to produce starch. This indicates that carbon dioxide is also necessary for the photosynthesis to happen. The leaf of the plant kept in the jar with potassium hydroxide does not show presence of starch, indicating that carbon dioxide is necessary for photosynthesis. So this is another very important activity indicating the importance of carbon dioxide. So now we are done with autotrophic mode of nutrition. I hope you all have understood everything. Next we have is heterotrophic mode of nutrition. As I have already told you that heterotrophic mode of nutrition is when the organisms are dependent on others. Others can be plants or others can be other organisms as well. One organism may consume other plants, like giraffe consumes the leaf of the plants, whereas some organisms may also consume other animals such as carnivores. We have lions, tigers, they consume other animals. So they are also heterotrophs and they follow heterotrophic mode of nutrition. All these organisms are dependent on others or dependent on plants directly or indirectly for their food. So these are heterotrophs. Now we have three types of different heterotrophic mode of nutrition. First is holozoic nutrition. Holozoic nutrition is when one organism takes in the complete food and then digests and absorbs them. For example, this is a human digestive system. If we have any food, we consume it directly through our mouth. That food completely goes inside our body, inside the stomach, and then here in the stomach it is digested by our body. We consume the complete food and we take it inside. Similarly, amoeba also takes in the complete food in its body and then digests it. Then we have parasitic mode of nutrition. In parasitic mode of nutrition, the organisms get their food from a living organism. So for example, here we have a leech. So this leech, you can see here, this is the sucker of the leech by which it has attached itself on the body of an organism. From this organism, which is called the host organism, the leech is continuously sucking blood and nutrients from this body, and all the nutrients of this organism are going into the leech. So the leech is taking nutrients from the host organism. So the leech is not killing the organism. Without killing the host, they just deprive the host of its nutrients. So we have lice. You have seen that often lice gets in our hair. That lice sucks the nutrients from our body without even killing us. So it nurtures itself but without killing the host organism. This is what happens in parasitic organism. The organism which is being deprived is called the host organism, and the organism which is sucking out the nutrients is the parasite, and this is why it is called parasitic nutrition. Then we have saprophytic nutrition. In this, the organisms take their nutrients from dead and decaying organisms. So after death, all the flowers, animals all start decaying, and from this decaying body, some organisms take the nutrients from the decaying body and then they grow. For example, here you can see there is a wood which is decaying and which is rotting. From this wood, the leftover nutrients are being absorbed by these mushrooms, and they are growing with the help of those nutrients. So they are having their nutrients from the dead and decaying organism. They break down the food material outside their body and then absorb it. Completely opposite to what was happening in holozoic nutrition. Organism took their food completely inside and then they digested it. But in saprophytic nutrition, organism first digests the food outside the body and then they only absorb the digested simpler substance. This is seen in mushrooms and in bread molds, which often grows on a rotting bread. Often grows bread molds which also follow saprophytic mode of nutrition. So these are the three types of different heterotrophic nutrition. Moving ahead to nutrition in amoeba. Now we have two organisms, amoeba and human beings. We are going to see how they follow nutrition. Both of them follow holozoic mode of nutrition, as we have already discussed. Now starting with what happens in amoeba. Amoeba is a unicellular organism or a single celled organism. It only has one cell. So you can draw any shape amoeba, and this is amoeba for example, and it has only one cell in it. So it does not have any special organs for nutrition. Everything occurs by this one cell only. Now what happens is there is a nucleus in the center of amoeba, as you can see. Whenever there is a food particle, the amoeba extends its pseudopodia. So from here it extends a finger like projection. From here the cytoplasm extends, and slowly and steadily they surround this food material completely. So they surround this food material completely. You can see the pseudopodia is growing around the food material, and then they completely surround the food material in itself. Slowly and steadily there is a food vacuole which is formed around the food, and then there are enzymes which are released in the food vacuole so that the food is digested. Then this digested food is absorbed, and remaining undigested matter is removed from the body by opening of pseudopodia, and this is ingested or removed out from the body. A very simple mechanism. Firstly, it senses the food particle where the food particle is, then it extends its cytoplasm by forming finger like projections which are called pseudopodia. These pseudopodia surround the food completely and form a food vacuole. Inside this food vacuole, the amoeba releases digestive enzymes which digest this food, and then those nutrients are absorbed by the amoeba for its growth. The rest of the unwanted substances are ingested out by the amoeba. So this is what happens in amoeba. Food is digested and absorbed. Undigested food is sent out through the surface of the cell. Very simple mechanism, and this can also come in your exams. This diagram is very important. You should know how to do it. Then another single celled organism which we have is paramecium. This is a paramecium. It is in a shape of a slipper. It is also called slipper shaped organism. It is in shape of a slipper. It is also unicellular, and it has, you can see, small hair like growth on its body surface which are called cilia. So whenever it senses a food particle, for example here is the food particle, it has a mouth in the central area. With the help of this cilia, this food is pushed towards the mouth. With the help of the cilia, the food is pushed towards the mouth, and from here it goes inside the body of paramecium. So this is what happens in paramecium. The food is pushed to a specific spot which is called the mouth, and then the food is digested. So this is about how nutrition happens in amoeba. Moving ahead to how nutrition happens in human beings. Humans are multicellular organisms. We have specialized tissues, specialized organs for digestion, for our nutrition. So this is a complex process, and there are various elements in it. You should understand all the elements, and I have listed down all the elements very nicely, so you can understand this very easily. Just pay attention to this. So nutrition in human beings takes place in the digestive system. We have a complete system of different organs and different glands. We have mouth, esophagus, stomach, small intestine, large intestine, and anus. These are the organs which are involved in digestion, and these are the glands which are involved in the digestion. All these constitutively make the digestive system. Starting with the mouth. First of all, how does nutrition take place? We ingest food. Ingest means we take in food from the outside environment. So with the help of hands, we consume this food and it goes into our mouth. So mouth is where the food is ingested. When the food is ingested, we have teeth in our mouth. That teeth chew and crush our food. They break, if we have a big bite, they break it into very small bites of food which are then easier to digest. They break it into small bites of food. This is mixed with saliva which is released from the salivary glands. Now this is the mouth. In this we have teeth, and over here we have the salivary glands in the mouth itself. The salivary glands secrete a very watery like fluid which is called the saliva. Saliva has one enzyme which is called the salivary amylase. You should remember the names of the gland, the enzyme, and what is the function of that. The salivary amylase has a typical function. Firstly, it is released from the saliva, and the saliva is released by the salivary glands. So the salivary glands over here release the saliva into our mouth, which is mixed with the food with the help of the tongue. The tongue mixes the food with saliva nicely. This saliva breaks down the starch into simple sugar. We know that starch is the stored form of sugar. The salivary amylase starts breaking down the starch into simpler sugar so that sugar can be digested and absorbed by the body. That is why starch breaks down the salivary amylase breaks down the complex starch molecules into sugar. So you can see that digestion has begun in the mouth itself. So whenever there is a question that which is the first part where digestion starts, so it starts in the mouth by salivary amylase as it converts starch into sugar. The food is mixed already with saliva, and then now the food is moved from the mouth to the esophagus by we have a flap like structure over here which prevents the entry of this food into the food windpipe. So now the food enters the food pipe after being chewed and mixed thoroughly by the tongue. The food enters into the esophagus. Moving ahead, let's see what happens in the esophagus. So in the esophagus is firstly a long canal. It is also called the food pipe or the food canal. The mixed food comes into the food pipe or the esophagus. Now in this esophagus the food moves down towards the stomach, but this also happens by rhythmic movements of the muscles of the esophagus. Now of this food pipe there are various muscles which are present over here. These muscles undergo a rhythmic contraction and relaxation. You can see here the windpipe is contracting. Here the food pipe is contracting so that this food is moving ahead, and the food pipe ahead of this is relaxing, so the food can come here. So due to this continuous contraction and relaxation of the esophagus, the food moves ahead. Again, when the food attains new position, the food pipe contracts so that the food is pushed ahead. Due to this contraction, the food is pushed ahead into the esophagus, and such movements of the esophagus are called peristaltic movements. Due to these peristaltic movements only, the food is pushed down our esophagus into the stomach. Now this was the esophagus. From the esophagus, the chewed food is coming to the stomach. Stomach is a long J-shaped organ. You can see this is in a J shape. Stomach is a J-shaped organ, and in the walls of the stomach, in these walls of the stomach, we have gastric glands. Now these gastric glands produces gastric juices. Now gastric juices contains three very important things. Firstly, it has an enzyme which is called pepsin. Then it has hydrochloric acid, which we know is a very strong acid, and they also secrete mucus. Now what is happening, what is the function of all three? Let's see. Now the food which is coming here, it has proteins, carbohydrates and fats. We have to digest all three. The digestion of carbohydrates has been started in the mouth itself by salivary amylase. Now coming to proteins. The pepsin enzyme which is present in the gastric glands, in the gastric juice which is released by the gastric gland, the pepsin enzyme breaks down the proteins. Pepsin enzyme breaks down the proteins. Now for this action of pepsin enzyme, to increase its activity, we need acidic medium. Pepsin enzyme needs acidic medium to act. So we have hydrochloric acid, which makes the medium of the stomach very acidic, so that pepsin enzyme can break the proteins. I am repeating it once again. Hydrochloric acid makes the medium of the stomach acidic, so that pepsin enzyme can break the proteins into amino acids. Due to this, there can be a lot of harm to the walls of the stomach as well. We know that hydrochloric acid is a very strong acid and it can cause destruction to the walls of the stomach. To protect the walls of stomach, we have mucus, which is again secreted by gastric glands, and it protects the wall of the stomach from the action of the hydrochloric acid. To protect the walls of the stomach from hydrochloric acid, we have mucus, which forms a layer over the walls of the stomach. Then this food, in which two things have happened. Firstly, starch has started to be digested by salivary amylase, and proteins are also digesting by the help of pepsin. So two components have started to digest. Now the food moves to the small intestine. This is the stomach. Now the food from here moves to the small intestine, which is highly coiled structure which is present here. So it moves to the small intestine. The exit of food from the stomach is regulated by a sphincter muscle. So here we have a muscle. Here we have a muscle which closes up. Let me change the color of this. So here we have a muscle over here which closes when the food is being digested in the stomach. As soon as the stomach is done with its work, this muscle opens and now the food passes from stomach to the small intestine over here. It moves on. So it is regulated by a sphincter muscle which releases small amounts of food into small intestine. It releases food in small amounts. Now small intestine. Small intestine is the longest part of the alimentary canal. It is highly coiled. You can see in such a small space a highly coiled, extensively coiled structure is present, and it has different lengths depending on the organism and depending on the food they are consuming. So in humans it is about 5.5 meters. Imagine a 5.5 meter long thing being coiled in such a small space so that it can fit into our body. In herbivores it is longer because herbivores consume plants. Plants have cellulose which is difficult to digest. Because it is difficult to digest, we need longer small intestine. In carnivores it is relatively shorter than the herbivores, but in humans it is approximately 5.5 meters. So small intestine is one of the longest parts of the alimentary canal. Now let's see what happens in the small intestine. Small intestine is said to be the site of complete digestion. Why? Because in small intestine the digestion of all three, the proteins, the lipids and the carbohydrates, all three digest in the small intestine. The carbohydrates, fats and proteins, all three components of food completely digest in the small intestine. Now let's see what's happening in the small intestine now. So you can see here, this is the small intestine which is coming from the stomach. This is the stomach, this was the esophagus. From the esophagus our food came and then it was digested by the churning movements of the stomach. It was digested over here. Now the food is acidic in nature because it had HCl, and now the food is called chyme. So we have acidic chyme which is present in the stomach. This acidic chyme moves to the intestine. Now the small intestine receives secretion from three different places. Firstly, from the liver and gallbladder. First secretion it receives from here, which is from the liver and the gallbladder. This is the first secretion which small intestine receives. The second secretion is from the pancreas. It receives secretion from the pancreas as well. This is the second secretion. The third secretion is of the intestine itself. The intestine also releases some secretions in the intestine. So these are the three secretions which are being secreted in the small intestine. Now let's see what happens. From the liver comes the bile juice and bile salts. Liver produces bile juice. This bile juice is stored in the gallbladder. So liver and gallbladder collectively release bile juice and bile salts into the small intestine. What is the function of bile juice and bile salts? First of all, their function is to make the food alkaline. So now our food is acidic in nature. We have to make this acidic food alkaline. Why? Because the pancreatic juices which are coming from here, they only act on alkaline medium. They can work only in alkaline conditions. Like pepsin needed acidic conditions to work, pancreatic juices need alkaline conditions to work. So for the action of pancreatic juices, the food has to be made alkaline, which is done by the bile juice and salts from the liver. Second function which they do is they break down the fats. Now the proteins are being breaking down and the carbohydrates are also being breaking down. Now what is left? Fats are left. Now fats are big molecules. They are big fat molecules which are broken down into smaller fat globules, which we call them by bile juice and bile salts. They break them into smaller fat globules, so that again the pancreas can work on the small surfaces. It is easier to work on small surfaces than on such a big fat molecule. So they break them down to increase the enzymatic efficiency of the pancreatic juice. Now what does this pancreatic juice do? Pancreas is a leaf-like organ which is present just beneath the stomach. So this releases pancreatic juice into the small intestine. This pancreatic juice has two main functions. First of all, it has trypsin enzyme. Like we had pepsin, we have trypsin enzyme over here, which is again responsible for protein digestion. Some protein was digested in the stomach, and now some protein is being digested by trypsin. So now protein digestion is complete by pepsin, which was in stomach, and trypsin, which is in small intestine. Second is it releases lipase. Lipase helps in fat digestion. Now these smaller fat molecules are acted by lipase, which breaks them further into fatty acids. Then the third secretion which we have is from the walls of the intestine itself. Intestine also releases some intestinal juice, and this intestinal juice again has three functions. Firstly, if some carbohydrates are left, some starch is left which is not digested still, it completes its digestion and breaks them into glucose. Fats are completely broken down into fatty acids and glycerol, and proteins, if there are any left, they are completely broken down into amino acids. These are the functions of all the three secretions which we receive from the various glands. I just quickly repeat it for you. We receive three secretions from three different organs. Firstly is from liver, secondly from pancreas, and then from the intestine as well. The liver secretes bile juice and bile salts, which makes the food alkaline and breaks down fats into smaller parts. Then the juice from pancreas, which is the pancreatic juice, acts on this alkaline food and breaks down protein into amino acids with the help of trypsin, and they break down fats into fatty acids by lipase. Then thirdly, the intestinal juices, if there are any carbohydrate, fats or proteins, if any of these are left to be digested, they digest them into their corresponding small salts, which can be easily absorbed by the body. Now let's move forward and let's see what happens in the large intestine now. This food moves to the large intestine and it's absorbed. Now mainly the food is broken down, the food is digested, and it needs to be absorbed. Small intestine also undergoes some part of absorption. So all the nutrients are absorbed in the small intestine. All the nutrients, the fatty acids, the amino acids which were formed by digestion are absorbed by the small intestine. They have small finger-like projections which are called villi. So on the surface of small intestine, they have these finger like projections which are called villi. In these villi they have extensive network of blood capillaries. So blood capillaries absorb the nutrients into it, and then these are transported to the body. The unabsorbed food which is left, which does not have any nutrients and water, majorly only water is left, this moves ahead to the large intestine. Large intestine we know is larger and is wider. It is wider. Why is it called large intestine even though it is smaller in length? Due to its width, it is wider than the small intestine. That is why it is called the large intestine. Large intestine absorbs water and minerals majorly. All the nutrients are already absorbed. Now only water is left. So 90% of the water is also reabsorbed, and now we have solid undigested food which is left, which is egested out by the anus. So we have egestion which is left. Rest of the material which is not used by the body, which is undigested unwanted material, is removed from the body by the anus. The exit of this waste material is regulated by the anal sphincter. So this is how the complete digestive system of human beings work. I have this small flow chart for quick revision of this. Let's see what happens. Firstly, the food is ingested into the mouth. Then this food is broken down by the teeth. The food is chewed, and then with the help of tongue, the food is mixed with saliva which is released from the salivary glands. Now the food moves to the esophagus, and by the esophagus it moves to stomach by peristaltic movements, which is rhythmic contraction and relaxation of the esophagus muscles. From the stomach it moves to small intestine. In stomach we have gastric juices which are released by these gastric glands. We have HCl, we have pepsin, and we have mucus. HCl makes the medium acidic, pepsin breaks down the proteins into amino acid, and mucus protects the lining of the stomach. Then this acidic acidic food is moved to small intestine, which further receives secretion from three different ways, as we have discussed, from the liver, from pancreas, and from intestine itself. And small intestine is said to be the site of complete digestion. Then some part of absorption also takes place in the small intestine with the help of villi. Then the remaining undigested food moves to the large intestine, which absorbs the excess of water. The solid undigested food further moves ahead into the anus, from which the waste is egested or removed from the body. So this was the complete process of digestion which takes place in human beings. I hope it is clear to you. If there are any doubts, you can always ask them in the comment section. So thank you so much for being with me for this complete session. A lot of these things were very new for you, but I think I made it simpler for you and easier for you. So thank you so much for being with me, and in the next part we'll do respiration and transportation. So please stay tuned for the second part. For more study content, you can always visit our website STUDIFYSUCCESS.com, and all the notes are available in the description section. So thank you so much.